Welcome to the Love is Our Nature podcast. I am your host, Cesar Rodriguez, and I have an amazing friend of mine, Tanai Milgram, as my guest today. So, Tanai, welcome. I'm so happy to have you join us. I can't wait for us to discuss and unfold everything that we've been up to. There's a little bit of quite a coincidence happening here that we'll get into. Right here, we are both in Costa Rica. So I would like for you to just introduce yourself and tell us how you're doing. So how could what should people know about you and who you
Mm,
are?
Awesome. So yeah, my name is Tanai Milgram, and I'm originally from Venezuela, but I grew up in Miami since age 10. I'm currently in Costa Rica for the rest of the week, actually. I go back to Miami after this week, and I'm an intuitive coach. I help people feel confident and self-expressed by getting out of their head and getting connected to their intuition, because the intuition is the language that our body speaks. And if we trust that, then that's how we create confidence and how we give ourselves the permission and freedom to be self-expressed in our lives. So that's sort of the process that I work through, really recognizing where your thoughts come from, how to differentiate that from intuition, trust your intuition, and that way you create this sense of permission and confidence in how you show up in your life.
Wow. So you're an intuitive coach.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
that's just
Intuitive coach.
and that's just so amazing because when I first met you, you were not an intuitive coach.
No, when you met me, I was a lost soul. I was a video producer, and you met me when I was coaching in SELP,
Mhm.
which I initially didn't want to.
And SDLP
Jody.
is a program at
Oh, right.
Landmark, right?
Mhm.
It's the third program of the curriculum for living called the Self-Expression and Leadership Program. And that's where we met.
Right. So we met at a self-expression and leadership program where I became a coach, and the lead coach of the program,
Hmm.
she had invited me to coach, and I got super confronted by all the dates, and I lied to her and I told her that I couldn't make the dates work. And
Mm.
then everyone in my life was pushing me to coach. Like, I didn't become a coach out of desire, really. It was everyone who was like, "You're great at this, you should pursue it." So I was like, you know what? I don't lose anything. I'm just gonna do this. And then I ended
Hmm.
up loving it.
Mm. Very good choice you made in that moment.
Yes, indeed.
Awesome. Yes. Yeah. So how did you go from, well, and you were a video developer at the time, right? You've
Video
freelance
producer,
video
yeah.
producer.
Mhm.
How did you go from freelance video producer to intuitive coach?
Yeah, so growing up, my mom was a healer, or she is a healer. So she always had me connect to my intuition in ways that people probably, if you're not familiar with this kind of work, you're gonna think like, what? But
Mhm.
ways like if I had to make a decision, she would make me write my options on pieces of paper and then either stand on that piece of paper or hold them and then see how my body responded to those papers.
Your mom would have you
If
do this.
Yeah, if I
Wow.
felt safe and open with one piece of paper, and if I felt clenched up with another one, then my intuition was speaking to me and responding to the energy on that paper, and
Wow.
that's what would determine like how I'm making my decisions. Or, if I had a shoulder pain, my mom would be like, connect to that shoulder pain. Like, what is it saying to you? Just breathe into it.
Mm.
And this one actually really pissed me off because all I wanted was like a massage or Tylenol, and she just wanted me to feel my pain.
Talk to it.
Yeah, I was like, what? My mom is so weird. Um, so yeah,
Great
I
stuff,
grew up.
mom.
Yeah, now I'm like, oh my God, you're the coolest. Like, I'm so lucky that you're my mom.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I grew up with a lot of awareness about myself and my emotions and spirituality and all these things. But at the same time, I had a really low self-esteem. Like, I didn't know it at the time, but I would fall into depression and anxiety, like
Mm.
depressive spurts, a really low self-esteem. And so that led me to therapy. And then when I became a video producer in New York, I felt like I needed more support in everything that I was dealing with. So I did Landmark, which is, the program in which I met Caesar. And then I got my own coach, and that led me to just like, continue to work on myself. But it was like continue to work on myself while realizing that I was actually extremely intuitive, extremely in touch with myself, it's just that I had a really low self-esteem that was in the way. I just had to like take care of that so that I could fully step into my power. And so once I did, everyone around me was like, you're really great at figuring out what is at the root of someone's block or someone's,
Mhm.
what they're going through.
Mhm.
Um, Growing up, I always had like intuitive hits about people. I knew like what people to stay away from, what people to get close to. So that's what would show up when I would help my friends get through relationship stuff.
Mhm.
So everyone said, dive into coaching, like try it. If you don't like it, at least it'll be for your own self development, but you should at least give it a try. And I had no option but to do it because the pandemic hit. And so
Mhm.
there's no way that I could continue producing videos. So I took on an 8-month coaching program. And very early on, I was like, yeah, this is my purpose. I'm
Mhm.
doing this.
You took on an 8-month coaching program. Can you tell us a little bit about like what kind of program
Yeah.
that was?
So the program is called IPEC,
Mhm.
and it's a coaching certification program.
Mhm.
And what makes them different is that they work around something called energy levels. And they
Mhm.
explain to you that you could either be operating out of catabolic energy, which is destructive, breaks down, slows down, like halts, blocks, or you could be operating in anabolic energy, which builds up,
Mhm.
inspires, moves, flows. And so that's how it differentiates all these different like state of beings that you could be in.
Mm, I see. I see. And you went in there into that program to see if it's something that you would be interested in, or you went in there already like I want to get the certification because I'm really interested in being a coach.
Mm. Yeah. So I'll just give you a background of what happened before, which
Mhm.
is that, I finished coaching at Landmark. Then I was in this relationship that very quickly became apparent to me that I didn't want to be in it.
Mhm.
Um, so I ended it. And then the pandemic hit. So then I lost my job. And then I just hit the deepest rock bottom of my life. But I was so excited because
Mm.
just I'd spent 2 years efforting to find my purpose, efforting to like find a relationship. And this rock bottom was like, what really pushed me to let go of control. To me, it was like, fuck, like now I can surrender. Like now this rock bottom is so deliciously pushing me to the bottom and I can only go up from here. And so I
Well,
spent
good for
two,
you for totally embracing that as like an opportunity,
oh my
right?
God, yes. I mean, if
As
there's
like a
anything,
gift.
yeah, there's anything people learn about the way that I lead my life is that I do just, I actually like, for example, like I came to Costa Rica to surrender. Like I came without any plans for the purpose of I'm going to put myself in this. Like I'm going to actually
Mm.
create the situation for me to learn surrender and letting go of control.
Mhm.
So that was the same with this rock bottom.
Mhm.
And
So
so I
yeah, you
looked
hit
at
rock
it.
bottom, and you're
Yeah,
like,
hit
"This is
rock
great
bottom.
because I have no control about this anymore."
Yeah, and I give up.
Mhm.
And so the minute that I gave up was when all these things started happening that led me um to connect to my desire to help people. And
Mhm.
also, I had all these things that I didn't like about this last partner. And I had to look at how I didn't like them in myself because, what we don't
Mhm.
like in others is just something we're not accepting in ourselves. So I was like, great. I just have my next couple of months of self work. Like, I have to look at
Mhm.
all these things that I didn't accept in him and accept them in myself.
Yeah, homework.
Exactly. Which is
Yep.
what you said on my podcast, which is that, we need to love our own humanness in order to have space for another's
Mhm.
humanness.
Mhm. Yeah. By the way, that's one thing you didn't say. That you're also the host of the
Oh
Commitment Flow
yeah.
podcast that I had the pleasure
Yes.
of being a guest in. So thank you for having me. And you
It
also
was
listened to that
lovely.
too. That was just a freaking awesome conversation where
Yeah,
you,
there's so much flow.
you get to hear all the silly, foolish ways in which I would compensate for my own lack of worth and validation and look for it out
Mm.
there in other women and never find it.
Uh-huh.
Totally go listen to it at my expense. But anyway, I'm so happy you're doing that because I love the conversations that you're having there. But you were also getting us to how you got to the to take on the 8-week program with IPEC
Right.
and what a
So yeah,
career.
so I did rock bottom. I'm super depressed. I'm not leaving my bed. And my parents were like, we have this sense that you'd be really great at coaching, and we're just going to pay for this program if you want to take it. And so I was like, well, okay, sure. And at this
Nice.
point, I think for the past 2 years, I was in this space of not doing much and being really hard on myself for it. And then I had full permission because the whole world wasn't doing much.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like everybody joined me. I was already home in bed, and now everyone was home in bed. And the tables completely turned because it was like, all right, I had already gotten this approval for me doing nothing. And the minute the pandemic started, I started this 8-month coaching program. I dove into my feminine of like singing, dancing, doing all these things that my inner child loves to do, like I loved to do as a kid,
Mm-hmm.
and I wasn't doing because it wouldn't lead me to career. And now it's like, guess what? You're in a pandemic where they're probably like there's less pressure to start a career. So why not do all the things that I loved as a
Yeah,
child? Yeah.
that's awesome. That's one thing that I observed. It was an interesting phenomenon with a lot of people in 2020, how we got to go into this cocoon, right? And say
Yeah.
like, shit, like what is my life really about? Like, what do I really want to
Mm.
produce out in the world, right? So I love hearing those stories like yours. I acknowledge you for being in this confronting situation where other people would kind of like cripple up and be at the effect of it, be a victim of it. And you really seeing this as a time where, all right, well, this is where I'm going to create things that are genuine to me, things that are authentic to what I want to my own self-expression. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to invite you into the show. So one thing that I want you all to know about Tanai is that from what I've got to know about her, she's somebody that takes her own self growth and personal development seriously. She dives. And when I say seriously, she actually does it very playfully, which is the best part. But when I say seriously, I mean like she dives in head first, like without even checking how shallow the water is or not. She just goes for it. And that's one thing that gotten the I've had the fortune to witness since you were a coach at Landmark up until now. How long has it been? Like about a close to a year and a half.
Yeah.
And I've gotten to just watch you through your process, and I'm just like in awe. Like this woman is like a hound dog, like taking on her growth. So
Wow. Thank
so,
you.
so just big kudos for you doing your own work, doing your own development.
Thank you.
I am recently starting to learn what the healing process is all about.
Mhm.
And even though I was already familiar with of this the spiritual journey and personal growth, I'm been discovering this whole new layer of it, which is like that inner healing. You're more well versed at this than I am, right? Like that
Yeah.
inner child, the wounded inner child work, and all that. And and I love what Aubrey Marcus just shared in one of his podcasts recently, and it was like self healing is the most selfless thing you can do, because if you're gonna try to go heal the world as an unhealed being, good luck.
Right.
Right? It's only
Yes.
when you've done your own healing that you can then
Yeah.
start to really be of service to others, right?
Yeah.
So that was such
Yeah.
a
Like
beautiful thing.
a lot of people, when they tell me like, yeah, I just want world peace and I want this and I want that. And I'm like, okay, great. What about world peace do you like? Okay, that we're all accepting of each other. Okay, great. Where are you not accepting yourself? And how can you start
Mm.
practicing that today? Because people are
Boom.
always like, yeah, it's like people are always like,
Yeah.
oh, but all my desires, like, what difference will I make? And they're too big. And I'm like,
Right.
well, actually, there's something very basic in what you
Hmm.
want, and you can apply it to your own life. And then it's gonna reflect and you're gonna create a ripple effect onto other
Hmm.
people.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was
And
probably
so I
your
actually
biggest.
wanna
Sorry, go ahead.
no, I just wanted to touch on something that you said before, which
Hmm.
is, me really diving headfirst into
Hmm.
my healing process. And I definitely have always been a go-getter. And since I was little, I was always like, if I want it, I can have it. Like
Hmm.
there's always a way for me to get it. And it was always an inner knowing that I had, always this intuition. Uh, Growing up, my parents put a lot of rules on me, just like everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
But to me, it felt very wrong. Like
Mm.
there were certain rules like don't trust people, or you need a sacrifice in order to do this, or don't give because you're not going to get, like all these little rules that sort of came from fear that really didn't resonate with me. And I had this rebellious side that said, no, I don't have to sacrifice to be happy. No, I can trust people. I had a lot of cans and a lot of, you can't tell me what to do. I'm going to figure out how to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And so that I applied to my self-development as well, where when I was 15, I think, and I was feeling like, just the regular teenage depression, and all my friends were feeling it, and they weren't really accepting me for it.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, I was starting to learn about law of attraction and being a creator of your life. And I was like, all right, here it is. Like, I'm gonna create my confidence, and I'm gonna be that girl that attracts guys, and I'm gonna be that girl that has this and this and this. And I really just took on um doing it, doing it for myself from a place of, I can attract what I want, I can do what I want.
Mm.
I can do whatever I want to get what I want. Which then of course had its downside as well,
Which what? I'm sorry,
because
it kind of skipped for a second.
oh which of course also had its negative impact, I guess.
Ah.
So an example is, as you know, um for 10 years of my life I wanted to get my breasts done,
Mm-hmm.
and that came out of, if I want to love my body, I'm gonna do whatever I like, nothing's in my way, I can do it. If I want a breast surgery, I will do it so that I can love myself. And that
Mm-hmm.
was a moment for me to really ask myself, okay, why do I want to get my breast done? And I realized it's because I want to love myself. And then I said, okay, for once in my life, can I actually love myself without doing anything? Can it actually not be about what I do to get what I want, but actually just accept what is?
Right, as you are.
Yeah.
It's
So that
beautiful.
was when I transitioned from this, like, I can do what I want to get what I want, to also loving what is, and not like looking to change everything all the time.
Right. Yeah, it's such a fascinating line between those two, right? I hadn't even been very present to that. How like, yeah, one way of being somebody who is ambitious and powerful, right? One way it could look is just being like a bulldozer out there. I'm gonna get this done because I say so, and when I set my mind to something, I do it, and nothing gets in my way, or whatever gets in my way, I
Mhm.
get it out of my way. And you see a lot of people like operating that way, just m- making things happen. Sometimes
Right.
some even forcefully, right? And it actually reminds me a lot of myself, like in my very late teens and early 20s, when I discovered entrepreneurship and sales. I started first in sales, and I'm like, I want to make so much money. I was in network
Mhm.
marketing for about a year, and I got sold the dream, and I'm like, I'm gonna have a Lamborghini and a Ferrari and a mansion with a helicopter on top and a yacht. And I thought that that was real success, right? I'm gonna buy my mom a house, and I was gonna be like a multi-millionaire. and
Mm.
and I was working like 16-hour days at 19 years old, making no money in network marketing.
Wow.
Right.
Yeah.
By the way, it was so valuable. I would have traded that for the world because it taught me a lot. And and then finally, like at 20, it wasn't until I quit sales, even though I was making like $10,000 a month at 24. I quit because I was miserable. I'm like, don't I don't have a life. Like all I do is work. Like what am I making all this money for if I'm not even like I don't even have time to use it. And it's really taken me honestly this long and still then some, because I'm not saying I'm even done yet, to learn to produce results from a different place, from a place
Mm.
of how you started to relate to your body, right? Of
Right.
allowing. Okay, so let me create from purpose, from my essence, from truth. Like what's true for
Right.
me,
From what your
right?
intuition is speaking to you.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
and my growth has been a lot slower in business,
Mm.
but it's another thing I wouldn't trade for anything because it's I've gotten the opportunity to like learn so much and grow so much in other aspects than just as a businessman and as an entrepreneur, but spiritually, physically,
Mm.
emotionally, and so many valuable lessons that had I just been so driven to just make money and make sales and make money and make sales, I would have missed the whole thing.
Yeah.
So thank
Yeah,
you for bringing that
absolutely.
distinction.
No, yeah, yeah. I heard an Abe Hicks podcast. Abraham Hicks, who was one of the
Hmm.
founders of, the law of attraction concept. And she
Hmm.
talks about how, you know, um we think when we want something and we express this desire that it's going to come to us because we think that we're a match to the desire because we have it, like a vibrational match.
Hmm.
But what we're getting in life is a vibrational match to how we are right now.
Mm.
So you actually got to get to the vibrational match of your desire to attract
Right.
your desire. So when
Yes.
it comes to action, you got to take the action from that
Mm.
vibrational match to your desire. So for example, like I'm starting this group coaching program and we have 5 women and I really want one more. And I
Hmm.
realized that I want one more because it feels incomplete, like it doesn't feel whole.
Hmm.
So today I took on like how can I feel whole with this group and in my life so that I could be
Wow.
at that energy level that like that's I want one more to feel whole, so why don't I just feel whole now? And then
Yes.
take action from wholeness. Like what does action from wholeness look like?
Yeah. And now you see why Tanai is such a great friend of mine. uh, it's just brilliant. Perhaps one of the biggest lessons that I've gotten from plant medicine ceremonies, which is where this podcast actually started. One of the lessons is that love is our nature, right? But another lesson, and one of the biggest ones that has took me over a year to start to understand, is when I was having the experience that there's so much suffering in the world, and I was suffering because of it, right? Because it was making me sad. That the psychedelic hula dancer entity that I was talking to in that moment, she said, solve it in yourself.
Right.
And at first, like, it threw me off. I'm like, what? I
Mm.
can solve I can solve world hunger in myself. Like, how does that even
Yeah.
make sense? Oh, I can solve genocide
Huh?
in myself. Like, how the
Right.
like, and and I love that you're alluding to the exact same thing, right? You drew the example with, like, oh, world peace. Well, okay, well, where are you not
Mhm.
at peace with yourself? Right.
Exactly. And
And
so yeah,
that's
and
what I want to
so
talk about too.
mhm.
Sorry, go ahead. Did you want to say about that?
No, I lost it, so you can keep going.
Okay, all right. Well, there's two things that I think. All right, well, let me start by saying this, that this podcast is brand new, right? It's probably like 6, 7 episodes in it already, and I'm really starting to think, like, well, what is it really for, and what could it really provide people, right? And I think to maybe like where I was a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, and the guidance that I could have used at that time. And I'm like, well, maybe it could provide the thing that I wish I would have received in my younger self. And perhaps there's other people out there. In fact, I know there's other people out there that could use certain guidance, that are asking themselves some big questions, especially around this age, right? Late 20s, early 30s.
Mhm.
And one thing that I think that, that listeners can that I can provide value to listeners to is to introduce them to the same thing that I'm learning about, which is this thing called the healing process. And
Mhm.
and that's one topic I want to explore with you, as well as intuition. Because there's no
Yeah,
intuition
they're
class
perfectly
as electives
aligned.
in
Yeah.
college. You know,
Yes.
you can't sign up for the intuition
Oh
class.
my gosh. Okay.
And you also don't sign up for the inner healing class either, right? So these things are things
No.
that here in the West we don't get taught. And it was
Mhm.
a big like moment for me, where I was pretty mind blowing for me, when I, even after a lot of personal development work and years of it, I saw that I'm like, wow, there is a huge aspect of myself that I've neglected. Perhaps it's this thing that
Right.
people call the the inner child, right? And like it went from
Yeah.
being a concept to me to actually having the experience of it and seeing it, right, for the first time. And I'm like, wow.
It's really powerful when you like actually start dividing yourself into different parts of yourself and you don't consider you as all of it, you
Hmm.
know? You start speaking in a part of me wants or this part of me needs as
Yeah.
opposed to saying
Yeah.
me.
Before, whenever I heard people say that, I thought it was the silliest thing. I'm like, all right, there's only one you.
Right.
So don't tell me like, oh, part of me this, part of me wants this, but part of me wants that. That to me, right? Again, the very rigid, logical Caesar,
Right.
which is apparently what I'm discovering the masculine trait is, which is the logic, totally out of touch with my feminine energy. Would just be like, what are you talking about? There's only one of you.
Right. Yes. So do you want me to dive into sort of all
Right. So
those three
now,
connected? The healing with the inner
yeah.
child, with the yeah?
Well, here's what we'll go piece by piece, and
Okay.
so I just wanted to introduce that and also talk a little bit about like how could this contribute to listeners, right? And what is
Yeah.
this whole
Huge.
podcast even
Okay.
about? So I think that's
So
where we could provide some value. So let's start with the healing process. What
perfect.
is for you tonight the healing
Mhm.
process, and why is it a worthwhile process?
Awesome. Okay. So, you know, when we talk about really loving ourselves and being the person that we want to be, I think we're used to being told, of all these aspects of ourselves that we can improve and change.
Hmm.
And then we're told accept what you don't like. And so it ends up being like, yeah, I accept that I'm lazy or I accept that I'm this. And it just comes from actually not approving of it.
Like being
It's
conformed with it, like sure, fine, yes, that's how I am.
exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's what I am. You're still making it wrong. That's the
right.
basis of it. It's still wrong. And you're like, I accept that it's wrong.
Yeah.
So at least I can speak to you on how I did my own healing process and the journey that I take my clients through, which is that the first thing you look at is where you aren't accepting of yourself and what part of you are you saying is wrong. And so
Hmm.
that's dealing with the mind. So like first we deal with what's in the mind so that we can start trusting the heart. So we
Hmm.
look at, the mind um is where the ego lives. Our egos are looking for us to do the right thing, avoid doing the wrong thing. And at
Just want to
first,
survive and stay safe.
yeah, exactly. And a way that the ego manifests itself is as your 5-year-old self.
Hmm.
So the first thing to look at is that sometimes you operate out of this 5-year-old self. And because yeah, so you operate out of this 5-year-old self by one of the ways, for example, is people pleasing, because the first time that we people please in our lives is parent pleasing. So we
Hmm.
learn from our parents what's right and wrong. And we
Yeah.
do everything that they told us is right so that we get rewarded. And we avoid everything they told us is wrong so that we avoid punishment.
Right.
And so that gets ingrained in us. We're conditioned to do that thing that our parents said is right and avoid doing that thing that our parents said was wrong.
Hmm.
And so then we're adults and we're still doing that and we don't realize that we're doing it. We're also making ourselves wrong for doing it. So let's say you don't know how to say no to people.
Hmm.
There's a part of you that feels that's wrong. There's a part of you that's like, I'm such a pushover.
Mm.
So so first of all, you're neglecting this part of yourself.
Yeah.
So the healing process there is first understanding that this is a 5-year-old version of yourself. So now we're dealing with the tiny person who has zero emotional intelligence.
What's the problem with neglecting a part of yourself, though?
How could you actually feel love if there's a part of you that you're not loving?
Mm. Yes.
How
I
is that
like that. That's
possible? Yeah,
point made. Go on.
exactly. So you look at this part of you that has a hard time saying no. You realize now it's a 5-year-old child and you understand that it's doing that in order to stay safe. Because in childhood, if you said no to your parents, you got reprimanded.
Hmm.
So now you realize this 5-year-old version of you is actually just trying to protect you. It's actually just trying to keep you safe. And you're like, "Aw, 5-year-old Caesar, like thank you so much. That is so sweet." And
Hmm.
I've actually been making you wrong. And I bet you that hasn't made you feel good.
Hmm.
I'm really sorry for that. It
Yeah.
wasn't my intention to make you wrong. I just had no idea. I didn't realize that you were doing this to protect me.
Mhm.
And
Yes.
now you go, thank you so much for doing that. And just so you know, I'm the adult here And I know that saying wrong is actually not a terrible thing. Like, I know you learned that when you were little, but right now saying no is actually pretty fucking great.
Yes.
But I don't want to take away your job. You're still really important to me. I know you want to protect me and I know you want to honor me and my safety. So from now on, the way that I want you to keep um, taking on your role is that whenever someone asks me if I want to do something, I want you to help me check in with myself and see that actually something that I want to do.
Mm.
That's how you can protect me from now on.
Hmm.
And so now you've integrated this inner child. So now your inner child doesn't feel neglected anymore. Now you're like reparenting yourself.
Hmm.
And also you're integrating a shadow. So shadow, for those of you who don't know, are those parts of us that we are literally keeping in the shadow. There's parts of us that we're ashamed of, that we don't like, that we were told not to show. The minute that you bring it into the light, it no longer runs your life, because whatever we keep in the shadow is like something that's subconsciously running our life.
Hmm.
Just like our conscious thoughts have effect on things, so do our subconscious thoughts.
Right.
So this shadow version of yourself, the people pleaser, you've now integrated it. You've now said, that's not wrong. That's just coming from a place that
Yes.
wants to keep me safe.
Yes.
And I'm not going to
Wonderful.
try to get rid of it. I'm just going to like train it to do something different.
Yeah. That's just so great. And because we do get conditioned to whatever is not popular, right? To keep it away, right? Like
Right.
whatever most people are not going to approve of, whether it's family, friends, society is not going to approve of, then we're going to just hide that and pretend it's
Yeah,
not there.
exactly. Or, you know, if you think of something like people pleasing or like being selfish, for example,
Hmm.
then you think, okay, how can I change that? That's wrong. How can I change it? And so then you can bring in the concept of what you resist persists.
Hmm.
And how, yeah, what you're doing is making yourself wrong for something. Like you're not actually coming from love, you're coming from fear.
Yeah. All right.
So
Great.
yeah,
So,
so yeah, so if you want, I can like now take you from where I go now, from the head to the heart.
oh, I got you. We're going to
Okay,
go there in a moment.
awesome.
However, we're both landmark graduates, and there's a beautiful concept in landmark called on the court, right?
Mm.
So, so I want to know, what does this look like on the court for you tonight? What is an aspect of your shadow self that stands out for you that throughout your healing process you've identified
Mm-hmm.
and that you've been able
Lying.
to like go to work on? Okay,
Lying.
you're sharing.
So I've already mentioned how the leader of our program that we participated in,
Hmm.
my first experience with her was that she invited me. I got confronted with her directness, and I felt like the only way that I could get out of it was lying, so
Hmm.
that I could tell her, so that she could approve of me, you know, validate what I was doing, because I had a valid reason, which is I can't work these dates. So I used to do that all the time, actually. I used to lie to partners, used to lie to friends, used to just lie to everyone so that I could look good, so that people didn't find out my humanness. Like they didn't find out
It's
that
it's so crazy to me because I could never picture you as a liar. Right?
I
You're such an honest
know.
person.
Yeah, and I value honesty a lot because I
Yeah.
had such shame about my lying. And I
Hmm.
had to realize that the lying didn't come from wanting to trick people. It just came from wanting to protect myself.
Hmm.
And I really, you know, like I remember even this session in therapy in which I realized that, and I started bawling, you know, because it was a very deep pain point for me. So much so that I'm very connected to my dreams, that my
Hmm.
dreams show me like what I have to work on. And I've had so many nightmares around being caught, around people like finding out that I've been lying,
Hmm.
finding out, you know,
Mm.
that
Wow.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And the the seeking for approval is also like a big part of all of this, right? Like as you were sharing, I thought of another example, very recent example, when you were coming up with the title for the podcast where I was featured in your show. and,
Yeah.
and you're showing me some ideas and I'm giving you some ideas. And then and then you put one title idea
That
that
triggered you.
that was it. Her title idea was
Confessions. Yeah.
"Confessions of a Wounded Little Boy," because I did share a lot about my own shadow, right, and what happened when I was 4, and how that went on to affect my relationships. How an upset 4-year-old was running my romantic life. So I was like, I saw that and I cringed, and I'm like, oh, okay, well, here's another idea. And then I'm like, wait a second, like, why am I not being straight here? And
Mm,
it's so interesting to see right there. There was that wanting of approval, right? So, oh, if I reject one of your ideas, then I might lose some of your approval. I need to be okay with everything that you say and accept everything that you say, right? And just be a fan of whatever you put my way. But then I was like,
wow.
fuck that shit. Like,
Yeah.
I'm doing this work.
And that's
Right?
exactly what gets
That's,
into relationships. Like we're so
yes.
focused on not hurting the other that then we don't say the truth. It's a form of people pleasing. And so
Right.
for me, I just cared so much about how I was perceived. I'm
Yeah.
this positive,
Mhm.
bubbly, perfect. Like I want to be perfect so badly that I
Right.
didn't want to show my humanness by
Mhm.
saying the truth. So
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
would so my whole life I would always come up with what how can I fabricate a story that
Yeah.
sounds so convincing that makes me look good?
Yes. Yeah, and for me, it was, ever since I was 4 years old, and I gave this girl a little paper heart in pre-K, and she threw it out, and I decided it's a bad idea to share my feelings because it's dangerous and it hurts. Ever since then, I went on to try as hard as possible to avoid conflict, rejection, and confrontation, right?
Exactly.
So, right there was one of those moments, as silly as it might be, with that title for your podcast, right? It was like, oh wait, that's gonna be like a confronting thing. Do I want to open up
Mm,
some conflict? So
yeah.
thankfully, thanks to this whole process, I was like, I interrupted it. I was
Mhm.
like, 15 minutes later, like,
Yeah.
hey, I just withheld for for a while. I really don't like that title.
And it was so awesome. And it's so funny now that you mention it, you actually reminded me that one of the first times that you coached me was around someone being indirect about wanting to go out with me.
Hmm.
And I got so triggered around them not being
Oh,
direct and
I
feeling
remember.
manipulated
You're like, why
because
does it pisses me off so much?
yeah,
Like, this guy's
because
like
I
beating
would
around the bush.
manipulate other people. Exactly. I wouldn't be direct. I got
Mm,
confronted with like remember I said it felt like he was
yes.
pushing me to be direct. And
Right.
so now you see the connection. I just had such resistance to being
People are just
direct. And
mirrors. Yes.
yeah, I would get so confronted by other people not being direct. It felt like I was being manipulated. Yep.
Wow. Yeah, yeah. This is so good. All right. So then you shared and illustrated with us a bit about the healing process and what it is. And you did mention one reason why it's an important why you consider it an important process for people to go through is to be able to fully love yourself.
Yeah.
Right. Is there something else you would say about why you consider the healing process important?
Yeah. It makes life so much easier. I mean, I'm so much lighter. Things don't trigger me as much. If I do get triggered, I mean, I just recognize the trigger really quickly,
Mm,
I'm an observer of myself. So even if something triggers me and I fall into some dark place, I'm just observing myself in this dark place as opposed
mhm,
to like fully being, deep in it. I'm just sort of seeing, oh wow, look at how that triggered me. Oh wow, look at how my thoughts are saying this. How can I stop that? Oh
mhm,
wow, my body feels tired. I should probably take some rest. So I don't sort of there's no drama anymore around having, these feelings like anger,
mhm,
sadness.
mhm.
Yeah. Everything's just a lot easier to
Yeah.
deal with.
Wonderful.
So when
Wonderful.
a lot of people say, "Oh, that's not for me," or "I don't know if I could do that," I'm like, "Okay, that's great. Like it makes my life a lot easier." I think it
Yeah.
would make yours a lot easier too, but if you choose to live the life the way you're living it now, then
Yeah.
great.
Yeah. And I've so especially like since December and this year, I've so learned to really honor people's paths, right? Like there's a saying that says when the disciple is ready, the master shows up, right?
Mm,
And it really is that way, I think, right? When there was always something about for me about religions that like go out there and recruit or evangelize, which to me it's kind of the same as recruit. Like, um, there's a lot to be said about sharing a valuable message, but when you're trying to get people to do things your way and then or follow your path, like it's like how could we so arrogant? How could we be so arrogant to know like what is right for people, right? And
Right. Or
that
for
was maybe that's
yourself,
the thing,
even.
right? Even for yourself, right? You can't even be sure
Yeah.
about that. You yourself are in
Exactly.
the
Like when
right
people
track.
are upset about how things didn't go as they should and they blame
Hmm.
themselves, I'm like,
Hmm.
how could you be so arrogant to think that your life should have gone a different way? And
Mm,
and that sort of it brings lightness.
yes.
It brings lightness because I don't know, for some reason when you think of it as like, oh wow, I'm so arrogant that I think I know
Hmm.
better than the creator or life or whatever.
Right.
It just makes it
Yes.
like a like dark humor, you know?
Yeah. 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 I
Yeah.
forgot where I heard it, where somebody said like, "Oh, like worrying about life is such a arrogant thing to do."
Yes.
Because how could you be so arrogant to think
Right,
that
and
like,
hearing you say that, it actually just takes it from a disempowered place to an empowered place, because
right?
arrogance is something we associate with power.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. The moment we're really worried about something, we are also as operating like we know what the way it should be going is, right? So we're like acting like we're smarter than God or the universe or whatever
exactly.
you want to call it. So just great. Thank you for sharing everything you've shared so far. Let's talk about now the guidance. Where do I buy the Heal Yourself book that's gonna just get it done for me and I can read it in 30 days and I can
Yeah.
come out and just be done with it, right? Because I haven't found such a book.
Okay, well, this is the next step, which is at the point where now you're loving all these parts of yourselves that you didn't love, you're now no longer at odds with yourself, which
Hmm.
creates a trust.
Hmm.
Now you see how every part of you just wants the best for you, which
Hmm.
means that now you can listen to yourself and trust that. And that's when you actually listen to your intuition and trust it too. You're no
Hmm.
longer judging the intuitive pull,
Yeah.
you know? Um, so let's say you have a decision to make. I always say if I put a gun to your head, you will know.
Hmm.
You know, I just a concept that really changed my life is that there's actually no such thing as decisions.
Hmm.
Um, you already know. Decisions come from ego trying to make the perfect choice. So there actually is no like we make things in we separate things into a duality
Hmm.
because our ego is trying to always seek perfection, always seeking doing the right thing. But there
Hmm.
is no such thing as the right thing.
Because
And
you
so
already
you
know.
actually already know,
Hmm.
but your mind now starts saying, let's make a pro and con list. Like let's get validation from other
You
people
again, the
to make
survival instinct, right? Trying to
yeah,
protect you, keep you safe,
exactly. So
analyzing
that you
other problems.
feel
Yeah.
like exactly. So that you feel like you're making the right choice. And that's when people fall into a anxiety attack or panic attack because their
Yeah.
brain their mind is running so much to figure out, what's the answer, what's the perfect
Hmm.
decision, what should I do, that you burn out.
Hmm.
And because you don't feel safe enough to trust that intuition. You need for it to make sense.
Yes. Exactly. Yeah, and I was being facetious earlier with like, where do you get the book, right? So
Yeah.
because there is no book, even though You Can Heal Your Life by Louise Hay, it's a wonderful book that I highly recommend.
Yes.
Uh, so how have you gone about um, walking this path of your own healing process? Tell us a little bit about that. Like, how do you know where to go next, who to go to, what to take on? Because you've been to quite a few
Yeah.
different things. You actually, I'm never gonna finish thanking you for referring me to your
No, no,
Akashic
no, no.
Record Reader, and
Yeah.
allowed a wonderful soul. And she was so valuable. I could do a whole episode on that consultation that I had with her, but it is what opened up for me this huge blind spot of
Mm,
neglecting a pain that I had been carrying. And I'm like, what pain are you talking about? And I'm like, okay, I think I know what pain you're talking about.
yeah.
And it really started me down this path, um, which happened to be the day right before my plant medicine ceremony, which really then revealed the whole thing. And now here I am. So thank you again. And
Hmm.
how have you, right? But the only thing is for me, then I've found sometimes like I don't know what the next step is, or I don't know what the next step is. How do you go about your journey and your process and your growth?
Yeah. It's been a mix of things. Lately, lately I just sort of leave it up to the universe. I'm very aware of the things that are being placed into my life, and I'm very aware of that. So it just happens that, I want to develop a skill. I want to get connected to something. I want to open something up in me. And then I just look out in the universe and see, where's the universe or the creator, whoever, dropping that in for me.
Mm,
So for example, um, my last desire was to, get more connected to manifesting
mhm,
and release worry, stop self-sabotaging. And I just like express that to myself. Okay, that's what I want. Um, and so my friend mentioned this coach, that I had met at a retreat, and I got on a call with her, and it just felt resonant, and that's what I did. And then like another example is, um I had okay, so what I think we've talked about how last year I was dealing with this UTI
mhm,
situation for like 2 years.
mhm.
And it's something that I just gave up on dealing with. It was like just very mild, it was just there. It wasn't really causing that big of a problem. And then I knew, a sex coach that I met at the same retreat. She made a post about, um working with couples, and I commented on her Instagram post. Oh my God, the minute that I'm in a relationship, I'll work with you. And she just said, well, actually, why don't we hop on a call and see if we can work together now?
Hmm.
And I signed on to coach with her with like barely any idea of what we would work through.
Mm,
And the week that I signed on with her, those UTI symptoms went from 10 to 100.
really?
Like the worst pain of my entire life. I wanted to die.
What do you think that was?
I mean, there was like my body was giving me a message, just like you said, that when the student is ready, the teacher shows up.
Mhm,
Same with lessons in our life. Like
mhm,
I was calling in, wanting to open my heart up more, and wanting to be, more available for relationship.
mhm,
And the way that life presented me that opportunity to heal that was through, these UTI symptoms. When women have issues in their womb or in their, urethra, all of that, it has to do with shame and guilt.
mhm,
And so, what I went on to work with this woman, and this is actually something I haven't publicly talked about, but it was the shame around masturbation as a child.
mm,
Deeply rooted shame around masturbating as a child.
yeah.
And so it's just like the universe puts it in my path.
Mhm,
I have a desire, I want to heal something, and the universe puts that situation in my path. A lot of times with my clients, people will be like for example, I'll have a client who's like, I want to step into my feminine. And then the next month, someone dies in her family, she loses her job,
mm,
she does this, and she's all over the place, such a mess, up and
yeah.
down. And I'm like, you asked to step into your feminine, here it is.
Yes. Careful
Like
what you
the
wish for, right?
feminine
Yeah.
is messy, the feminine
Right.
flows, the feminine has intense feelings.
Yeah.
And so it's beautiful to be present of that, of how you are a creator in your life, and everything is happening for you. Everything is an opportunity to heal something.
Yeah. You know what I just thought about I actually just recently also took on getting in touch with the feminine energy within me, and you just made me think about it. Like before we started, I told you about my bike getting stolen and how sad I was that my bag got stolen, and
Hmm.
now starting to make sense given what you said. Like being with that sadness, right? And it's part of the giving yourself space for sadness is part of the feminine energy. So maybe I called in that
Yeah.
experience myself where everything was dandy. Everything was just so convenient so far. Everything was perfect. I love where I'm staying. I love the air. I love how close to the beach I am. And my bike gave me access to the whole town. I could cross the whole town in 10 minutes. And I was riding along the shoreline with my bike. And then I got stolen. And it made me so sad. And I'm like, wow, okay. Now I'm like,
That's
yeah, that's
there.
part of the process.
Wow, that was
Yeah.
there. The sadness.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's
So
I would say that yeah, that's a part of the healing process that right now I don't think we're putting enough emphasis on. I think we're coming up with all these workshops and projects and group coaching and all of that. But I think it is really important to feel your feelings. We're
yeah,
not, it's not about feeling better. It's about getting better at feeling.
right.
That's something that, I'm very
Yes.
present to. And, um, and I'll just bring up something with a client, but then I'll see how it applies in my life. I had this client who was like, yeah, I have full approval of anger. Anger is great. And I'm like,
Hmm.
okay, so what are you angry about? Like, express your anger. And she could not,
Mm.
and I think it's really important that
That's perfect.
these feelings are there to be expressed. We
Yes,
don't
because
just say, yeah,
we all think we have things handled, right? Oh, one thing
right.
for me was I I used to brag about how like I didn't care about what people thought about me. Like I don't care
Mm.
about what people think about me. I'm so over that. Like I don't care what people think about me, right? And only to then spent over a decade saying that to then only realize at late 20s, early 30s, saying like, wow, my whole life has been about getting approval from people.
Wow,
Uh,
yes.
so yeah, sometimes we think we have things handled and we don't at all, or there's just a whole
Because
other
it's
level.
not about having things handled. That's the
Right.
thing.
Yeah, you don't have things handled.
Yeah.
So
So it's like, so people, so I could even say in my own life, just different feelings that I thought I had approval of, but then the minute that I started feeling them, I wanted them to be over.
yeah, exactly.
We think certain feelings are wrong, like sadness.
Hmm.
We don't say, how are you doing? Actually, I'm feeling pretty sad today.
Yeah, I really appreciate people that actually answer that question genuinely and say something like that. More and
Me
more I'm
too.
starting to run into people saying those things, and I so appreciate it. Like, yeah,
Mm.
thanks for
And there's
telling me how
even
you're
certain
actually doing.
people. Yeah, there's certain people. Actually, I've been practicing this myself too, where when you ask them the question, they close their eyes, take a deep breath,
Hmm.
and then get really present to what's there. Because when we
Hmm.
answer that question, it's so automatic. We're not
Hmm.
actually
Yeah,
seeing
we're like,
what's
I'm fine.
there for us.
I'm fine.
Yeah.
I'm good in you.
Uh huh.
Good in
Yeah.
you.
Getting you?
Yeah. Wow. All
Yeah.
right. Well, look, time has just flown by, right? It's been
Yeah. Literally.
like an hour already. I feel like we just started.
Yeah.
So this won't be our last conversation in here, I don't think. And I want to ask you a couple things before we go, and then give you an opportunity to have people connect with you. So, real quick, what are you most passionate about?
Mm. When am I most? Oh my God, I have so many passions. I'm
Hmm.
an ENFP Leo. Um, so
Well, if you
let
had
me
a
see
gun
what's
to your head,
present. Yeah, let me
and
see
you could
what's
only pick
present for
one.
me right now.
All right, go
Exactly.
ahead.
What's present for me right now that I'm passionate about is hmm, I think feeling the sensations of seeing things. I arrived to this town, Manuel Antonio, and there's so many beautiful trees and flowers and birds. And I felt so turned on by life. And
Hmm.
I realized, I mean, that's the reason why I left Miami. I just did not have enough things to look at that would turn me on.
Hmm.
And so that's what I'm really passionate about, feeling
Mm,
turned on by my surroundings.
that's wonderful. Oh yeah, and we're
Yeah.
such a great place. We didn't even get to talk about, but coincidence, we're both in Costa Rica here,
Right. I know we
discovering
have so much
ourselves, discovering.
we could just
Yeah.
host a whole podcast together, literally. Yeah.
Right.
Just our
Yeah.
conversations.
All right. Beautiful, beautiful. It's such a beautiful place to appreciate our surroundings for sure. Well, here's
Yeah.
my last question tonight. If there was one thing that you could accomplish before you leave this world, what would it be?
Oh my God. I would love to host a massive retreat leading people to get connected with their intuition and feel the
Mm,
courage to have that be their compass.
that's amazing. When's that retreat?
Yeah.
I'll probably go.
In this summer.
Oh, beautiful.
Now you're like gonna landmark me and be like, all right, by when are you gonna do this?
Yeah. Send me your
Integrity.
structure. Send me your action plan.
Yep.
Wow. So, yeah, I see that you really deeply care about people getting in touch with that part of themselves that maybe we've fallen out of touch with, right? And I for sure
Yeah,
am learning that myself.
I get so turned on by people feeling the full permission to be who they are. It
Mm,
is so exhilarating because that's honestly how I lead my life. I mean, I also have my own shadow of being very hard on myself, but what pushes me forward is that there's a deep part of me that believes that I am perfect just the way I am. And
mm,
I'm going to show up in that way for others so that they feel perfect just the way they are.
yes. Just gonna let that simmer for a moment. That's amazing. If people just got that they're absolutely perfect the way they are, like it would just be so amazing. So tonight,
Yeah.
how can people stay in touch with you? How can people learn more about you and learn from you and
Awesome.
follow
Yeah.
your journey?
So the best way to follow my journey is on Instagram. My
Hmm.
handle's at Tanai Milgram. And on my website, www.tanaimilgram.com, that's where you can book a discovery call with me if you'd like to work with me in any way. I work with clients one-on-one. I'm also starting a group coaching program next week for women who want to go from what we talked about, from people pleasing to being connected to themselves and putting their own needs first.
Hmm.
And I have my podcast, Commitment Phobe, which is about my journey, realizing that I had, a lot to heal around vulnerability and connection and intimacy. And everything that I discovered was behind that. And I get into conversations with people like Caesar
Hmm.
around, these concepts about, the things that show up in our relationships.
Yeah.
And I'm just open for conversation and creation.
Mm.
So anyone that just wants to reach out to me, DM me on Instagram, and I just, love getting to know people. That's why I love traveling, getting into conversations. So thank you so much for having me.
For sure. And let me say something about Tanai's Instagram. Okay. She keeps it real. Anything
Yeah.
that you've ever thought about, like, oh my God, I can never post that. She's already posted.
Yes.
I think she goes
Anytime
out.
I think to myself, I can't post that, I just post it.
Yeah, I can tell. I can tell because I'm like, did she just post that?
Yeah.
And then I'm like, damn. And then it ups the bar for me. And I'm like, shit. Like,
Oh my
I'm
God.
totally pretending like in my posts. And
Wow.
so you've inspired me big time with like really
Mm,
speaking genuinely and from a place of truth and just being real, not with
yeah.
sugarcoating or cherries on top, but like just raw stuff. So follow tonight's Instagram.
Yeah.
And everywhere else, go listen to the Commitment Phobe podcast. It's amazing. So tonight, thank you so much for coming here, sharing your light and your gifts with us. It was such a joy having you, and we will be in touch for sure. And thank you, everyone, for being a listener of the Love is Our Nature podcast. Make sure to go to our website, subscribe to the blog, and I'll leave you now with this amazing post roll. Till next time, bye bye.